Welcome to the Wisendale Weekly Wrap-Up, where we talk about architecture, design, everything in between. Usually we're in the Merchandise Mart, but this is our first podcast outside of the Merchandise Mart. We're here at Mana Contemporary, second floor, with a special guest on the Wisendale podcast. So go ahead, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Hope Wang. I met you, Felix, at Chicago Textile Week 2019, and we've just been working in various forms together for the past 2 years. I've been a full-time artist for the past 2 years. I think when we met was really the time that I was diving into my studio practice, and I am a textile artist. I do weaving. I also screen print. I also have a photographic research wing to my practice. I also write poetry, and I also am the founder and facilitator of Loom Room, which is the first baby steps toward a community fiber studio in Chicago that's centered around working artists and providing equipment for working artists.
Cool.
So it's a little bit about me.
Is that how someone asked me the other day how we met, and I was like, I don't really remember. Was it Textile Week?
Yeah, Chicago Textile Week.
Yeah, probably at the happy hour or something.
I think it was a little bit before, because you put my wood grain weavings on the postcard.
Oh, that's right.
Before Chicago Textile Week.
Right,
so,
right.
I think that was, and then we saw each other every other day during the week, and just kept in touch from that. So.
Nice. So how is we're talking Chicago Textile Week is going on too, and how has that week been going?
It's been wonderful. I mean, it's a huge production. It's a week-long program of various different events with various different participants who are experts in their field, and they have been really generous to host a ton of people to come into their spaces, showrooms, studios, and to give tours or talk about their practices or talk about the work. And it's just been a really great way to facilitate connections for fashion, upholstery design, textile manufacturing, artists, and then just production and various things in between that sort of intersect between all of those disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been really great to meet all kinds of people that I would have never found opportunities to intersect with or meet, who are all textile adjacent or just textile enthusiasts. Mm-hmm. And it's just been a really great week to build on the momentum of 2019, and then really try to bring that forward again a second time for 2021. And we were meeting every single Sunday for the past year, working on different phases of programming, on a design call, and then on an artist exhibition, and then in just managing the little administrative details of putting together a cohesive week of events and making sure that that's all well communicated and well engaged, and also going to be fruitful for people who are attending. So we have 2 days left as of right now during this interview, and I think everything's been so great so far. We've had 30, so anywhere from 30 to 80 people engaging in each of the events each night. I think on average 40 to 50, which has been really wonderful. Consistently every single night to meet new people, but also see the same faces from the previous night, and to be able to talk about various different pathways around what being in the textile world means. So it's just been a great time. Well,
you guys had a call for artists as well, right?
Yes.
So can you explain a little bit about that? Or
yeah.
Was there a winner to that? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
So we had a design call that was hosted between Chicago Textile Week and Carnegie Fabrics.
Okay.
So the founder, Kat Neary, she works for Carnegie, and they were very generous to host this, where they would be working with 3 different artists who would be selected by a jury to turn their vision of their design into a textile that would be then upholstered into cushions for these pew cafe chairs at the Epiphany Center for the Arts. So it was a whole ordeal trying to connect these 3 sort of organizations together. on the jury, we had one of the founders of the Epiphany Center for the Arts. We also had Erica Warren, who is a curator for the textile department at the Art Institute of Chicago, as well as Chase, who works for Carnegie in their New York location. And we originally, in the first phase of the call, we had maybe like 10 artists and submit work, and then we extended it. We also procured funding to, compensate these artists for their designs. It's really important to be shifting out of asking for free spec work. So it was really important to me to make sure that like the artists would be getting some kind of compensation for the work that they were doing and providing and making these wonderful textiles. So after that, we received over 100 entries, which meant it was a huge thing to put together this jury packet. And we had to extend it a second time in order to really allow the jury to have enough time to look over all the designs, because there were so many really great ones. And we had 3 winners who worked with Carnegie throughout this past summer to develop the textiles, and they're on and samples of that yardage is on display at the Epiphany Center for the Arts this week. So
very cool.
And all of those artists, I think one of them is a fiber artist. 2 of them don't really have a textile background. So what they submitted were pictures, drawings, like paintings, and it was just really wonderful to see that translation. At least as a textile artist myself, like I'm working a lot with photography and with other elements and materials, and it's the most fun thing for me is to be able to translate that into something that isn't that previous material or object. It's something completely new, because when you manifest an image, a digital image, into a material object, there's always something new. There's something lost. There's something born out of it, and it's just been exciting to witness that happen with the design call too.
Did you submit?
I didn't.
No? Is that a conflict of interest? Maybe?
Yes, and I really wanted to just be able to help facilitate this opportunity for other people. For me, I think that I wear a lot of different hats of facilitating opportunities for other artists, and then also my own studio practice. And it's really just a matter of me over the past few years learning, like, where do I put my energy and what kind of energy is it? So for Chicago Textile Week, I really wanted it just to mostly be facilitating opportunities for other people, to meet new people, to get more eyes on their work.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I've already done the job of trying to create this opportunity and streamline it to be enjoyable and exciting for all the parties involved. Yeah. So it didn't feel like it was pertinent to me to submit anything of myself.
Well, I mean, you're coming fresh off of a residency in Cleveland, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cleveland,
so
Ohio.
How was that?
It was fantastic and exhausting all in one. It was a lot of things. It was a month-long residency at Praxis Fiber Workshop. They, in 2020, acquired a TC2 Jacquard Loom and opened it up for artists to rent time for 2-week-long or 1-month-long residencies.
And not to cut you off, sorry. What can you explain that loom a little bit and why it's so important?
Man.
Highlights.
Yeah. So the Jacquard Loom, it's a computer-assisted loom where I use Photoshop files and I code them with weave structures, so textile patterns embedded into these images, and then the computer attached to this loom has a software that can read that code. And people often think, they're imagining industrial mill, where there's no human standing in front of it to at least weave every single line. But this is computer assisted in the sense that the computer is helping me create compositions that are a little bit more specific to the files that I created. So it's like on a floor loom, you might be able to do more abstract things, but you can also do a lot of really complicated stuff. But you're limited by the combinations of harnesses, which are like these apparatuses that lift a combination of looms, of threads. Where on the Jacquard, you can control and separate every single thread that lifts. So if you have 2,000 threads, I can code in exactly where each single thread is going to lift at any point in time.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot more, I think, flexibility in how you control the threads. But I'm still standing there. I'm still pressing a foot pedal, still weaving. All the decisions I make as an artist are still embedded in the creation of those textiles. But it has that added element of being able to create a digital file and putting it onto the computer and then immediately getting to weave that like structure.
Nice.
But it takes about the same amount of time to weave on a traditional floor loom. I think that just the design element or the planning element, it takes a little less. It's a bit more efficient in terms of the control that you can have.
Yeah.
So that's how I would describe it.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that it was big for them to get that.
Oh, it's
loom.
major because that loom is extremely inaccessible in the world at the moment.
Yeah.
There's a handful of institutions, art schools, various universities around North America that have this loom and provide it for students to use. But ultimately, I think that Praxis is the only facility in the US that has a loom available for artists to use independently and outside of an institution, which is kind of insane. Because there's generations of alumni graduating out of these programs who make extremely compelling work, and then they have to cut it off. We don't know when we're going to next use this loom. We don't have access to it consistently, which means our research is always stalled, or you have to find something else to do, or it's extremely expensive, or you have to go to grad school again to access this, and that's just absurd to me. It's what a lot of people have done, or they have to like apply to be faculty at these universities in order to have access to it.
Damn. Even
then it's so limited because you can't overlap with students.
Wow.
And that's kind of what shaped like my desire to found a space where it's just about equipment access, consistent equipment access, where you're not attached to a teaching institution where the focus is about teaching students, getting them access. It's just for people who need equipment to continue doing their practice and to keep it sustainable and to keep working. So I think that the inaccessibility of the Jacquard loom, which is largely what my work is made on, it really has shaped how I feel about access to equipment, about being a working artist, and what it means to be part of a community. So
which is a small community, right?
It's a small community.
I didn't even, before getting involved with Textile Week in 2019, I mean, I knew of textiles, obviously, through the career, but I didn't know, I was always thinking of it as a large scale, right? And I wasn't thinking of it as a small kind of slow scale that we're talking about now. And then I didn't know that the loom that you were practicing on in Cleveland was that scarce. Like, that's wild. So no wonder. So how many pieces did you produce for there? What was that experience like?
I produced 30 pieces in 27 days. I was there 27 days. I wove 23 days, and I made 30 pieces in that time, which is why I said it was...
That's hustle out there, everybody.
That's why I said it was exhausting, because I don't want to work like a production mill.
Yeah.
I was weaving basically 10 hours every single day, standing, because you can't really sit in front of there because you're pressing a foot pedal all the time. And so I'm, throwing a shuttle back and forth, pressing a pedal every single time. Like, it's like something like this size might have been 6,000 picks, and that means 6,000 pedals, steps, and more, probably sometimes more of those shuttle throws. So it's the amount of labor is quantifiable. And
so like something like this, you did in one day?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the nice thing about not being in a teaching institution where you're sharing equipment with like 30 other students and having a residency where you're independently hogging this equipment was that I could weave in my underwear or take a nap or go stop for lunch, and I wouldn't be worried about someone coming in and weaving in the middle of my design, because when I was in school, you had to weave your whole project at once. And that often meant that, one, you might be limited to whatever you could get done in 8 hours. Or, you know, if you didn't finish it, something came up, then you'd have to do it all over again. So I mean, given the amount of stuff that I made, yes, I made one piece per day pretty much. If not more, like 1.5.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like woven in one day usually.
Wow. And for those of you listening us on audio, check out the video portion. We're sitting in front of Hope's pieces here. So can you describe a little bit about that? I know we're jumping all over the place, but
yeah,
tell us a little bit more about what we're seeing.
Yeah, well, I guess to finish the thought about like the residency, so Praxis, they did an incredible job to acquire this loom and to provide it for people outside of an institution for artists to access.
Nice.
So I was their third resident in May, and I had that time for a month all to myself in this wonderful house in Cleveland where the loom was on the first floor and I lived in the second floor apartment, and I just like made breakfast, lunch, and dinner and wove in between and went to bed, which is like the most consistent schedule I've ever had for a very long time.
So you were by yourself?
I was by myself. I don't like being by myself. Even as an introvert, I'm just like, if I'm working, I'm by myself. And at the loom, it's so loud, I wouldn't be spending time with anyone.
Right.
So it was not fun not being able to, and we're in a pandemic. It wasn't fun to not be able to have like other artists around to look at the work, to talk about it, to process it. So it really was weaving in a frenzy all by myself. Like I saw a few people on the weekends, but then I wanted to make up for the social time. Yeah. So it was, I don't like the state that I get in when I'm like production 100% all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that it was only a month, because I mean, the loom kicked me off. Like I literally ran out of material in the middle of a weaving, which I was like, okay, I have to like come back again and start that weaving all over again, because the threads just snapped on me. Nice.
Do you have that piece up in here anywhere?
No, I just cut it off, and it's
that would have been a great piece just to, you know, like this is the piece, the end piece that cut me off.
It is a little sample piece, but nice. And it looks complete, but yeah, it is not the full piece. So it will have to just either get cut down even more into something else, or nice. I don't know. I'll keep but yeah, so that was sort of the experience of my residency. I loved it. I had so much fun. I had been sitting on a stockpile of ideas for 3 years, because that was the last time that I was on a Jacquard Loom. And I just had like a huge sketchbook and like tons of files, and just was making files like every single day. And that's like the invisible part that you don't see when you're looking at this material object, is actually like some of the planning is largely spent on compiling photos, collaging images, or creating physical collages and then photographing them and then turning them, distilling that image into something that can be weavable, and then actually like applying structures that make sense for the image, and then test weaving them to see if it looks, you know, like you'd want it to look. And that's just like a lot of back end file making, test stripping type of labor that isn't part of the final piece. So I would say that like in a lot of the works, there's like possibly the double the amount of labor it took to make one piece it took to plan and execute that finished one. So yeah, I guess if we want to talk about the work behind us, which is all digitally woven with different structures.
Every single one is digitally woven?
Yes, actually.
Oh, wow.
I think, is there a particular one that you wanted to talk about?
No, just in general. I mean, these pieces are great, have a little architectural feel to it as well. Obviously, for those of you who can't really see, we're going to be showing some B-roll of it, but that's the ADA markers on the sidewalks.
Specifically the Chicago Transit line. So
Chicago
the
Transit
CTA,
line, exactly.
the blue strip that lines all the platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you get that inspiration? Or where did you get that from?
I guess like a little bit more about my work is I think I really draw from a lot of architectural building materials, a lot of construction materials, because they have a lot of patterns, and I think I relate that to textiles a lot too. But also that labor is just, it's a similar conversation, I think. But yeah, I like to find funny moments in our built environment and kind of like recontextualize them through printmaking or weaving. And so I actually started by making prints of the ADA platform pattern. So on the table over there, like we have like a clay impression. So I like rolled out a bunch of clay and I went onto the platform and I just got the impression of it, and then screen printed that really, characteristic blue onto paper, and then hand embossed all the little dents to create that texture. And then I thought that it would be so fun to do that in weaving, but in a different way. Structurally, I used a structure, a textile pattern that splits the cloth, the warp, the unwoven threads in half to create two separate cloths at once. So I'm able to weave two separate things at a time, and then I would stitch them. I'll also apply a structure that would stitch them together. So if we cut this in half, you could actually pull apart the parts where it's two cloths, and then there's stitch points where it becomes one, and they sort of like become they become like a pocket. So I really wanted to think about the actual structure of textiles with the architectural patterns, instead of it just being an image of this like dimensional object, that it itself is dimensional, that is two cloths at once, whereas with stitch points, so you get this like puffy aspect of like, two separate things, and then the moment where it becomes one, it just like has this extra puff, which is sort of similar to the buttons on the ADA platform. Yeah.
Understood.
And then here, like, this is again thinking a lot about construction materials using caution tape, and I just think it's so funny when you pass by a space that's been this like arbitrary border that caution tape creates, that's really provisional, and it's really funny, I think, when you pass by, especially in outdoor spaces, it's like tangled and whipped around by the wind, or somebody came and just like, I don't know, messed it up. And I love that personality that all these like materials that humans use to tell other people what is a boundary. So it's very much about human activity, human passage, but it doesn't have that human body. But I think that it really embodies that like personality. So a lot of these are really, like the caution tape ones are playful because they're like drawing on that tangled moment of like things just in the wind or like wrapped around something. So this was like kind of a digital collage in the sense that I created 3 separate files, compositions based on 3 separate images of tangled caution tape, and then I would open one file, weave it for a couple inches, change up the colors, open up a different file, and then so it's like collaging different files as I'm weaving. So again, I really enjoy that like dimensional collaborative process between 2 different processes, like the digital file making and then also the weaving. So it's not just like I made one file and then it got like output into a piece of cloth. It's like as I'm at the loom, I'm making these spontaneous choices to open up a file and then open it up somewhere else and then put in a different color. So I think that's really what I think is really fun, and to be able to push the machine to do something that's not just textiles, that's not just digital.
Right.
Although I would argue that weaving itself is inherently digital. But yeah, that's kind of like a little bit of the process. No,
that's great. You could definitely see the architectural aspects in these. Obviously, love the burnt tire burn marks as well. I know I'm blocking this one, but this is How did you decide to frame this one too?
It's a window reflection of a vacant storefront. So since 2018, I've been collecting photos of whenever I pass by vacant storefronts and just collecting those images. And they're often, you can tell that it's vacant through brown paper, blue tape, plastic sheeting, or even just an active construction zone inside. And we see those as like negative space of like often failed architecture due to a lot of things like business turnover, gentrification, or just even transition from like changing up a space if it's a construction space and it's just like improving something. But I think that there is this like I said, negative space where we were like, oh, this isn't complete, it's not open to the public, it's not even a thing on Google Maps anymore, so it doesn't exist or doesn't have narrative. But I think that often the vacancy is a narrative, and so I think for me, I was just collecting these as photos, and then I cannot make this on any other equipment besides the Jacquard Loom. And so it's really just about pushing the limits of the loom and the digital file and the structure and the patterns to create something that looks like an illusion. It looks like from a distance a window reflection. It looks like glass. It looks like plastic. And then you get closer and it's all just threads laid over each other.
Fantastic.
And I wanted to weave a frame based on certain colors that I see in space that are often related to like building materials. And then I decided to also incorporate an actual like color matched frame for them, sans glass, because I want it to just be an illusion that it's not actually glass in front of it, but it looks like a window reflection. So I think that the physical actual frame really helps add dimension. It kind of creates this like moment, like a shadow, and you kind of feel like you are entering some kind of portal or illusion, or it looks like a window frame. And it's also just easier to handle and store. So I love being able to have them color matched, but I also just love them being easy to deal with.
And I mean, this space is great. Talk a little bit more about Loom Room and the accessibility that you were mentioning.
So like I mentioned briefly before, Chicago does not have a fiber-centered artist studio that is separate from residency, separate from education centers. I really took a lot of note from some of the print spaces that exist in Chicago. They're so well connected. A lot of printmakers know each other. They have so many opportunities like Zine Fest or Book Fair to sell their works or just like have community. And I graduated from a fiber program and did not feel like I didn't know where to go, where to make work, who to like connect with, where was a central location to even connect to other people who are still in the city. And loom like the ones that I have in my studio, each of them were about like $2,000, and that was secondhand. So, and they're large, they're like 40-50 inches wide, and then about that same amount of space like in lengthwise. And that requires you to have a studio or like extra space in your apartment. And definitely. A lot of people don't have those. It requires space, money, all these other prerequisites for you to even get a loom to set something up on. And I didn't weave for several years because I was like, that's not a priority. I'm not going to do that. I don't have space. I live with 4 other people. Where am I going to put this loom? And I just didn't really believe in private personal studio. I learned in a huge room full of like 20 to 30 looms of multiple different kinds of looms, and I loved that camaraderie of walking into a space and you just saw someone else's piece just in progress, and you could ask them about like the structure or the technique that they were doing, or you could just enjoy that energy of things being made, even if they weren't there, or if they were there, nobody was talking, but we were all just making stuff. Right. And I loved that, and I think that it's possible to recreate outside of an institution. So last year. So this is like a very new
Venture.
venture. And last year I received a small city grant that actually covered exactly the cost of one loom that had just become available. And I feel like it was a sign. And it was also another printmaker and weaver who had heard me talk about all these ideas, these desires, and was like, we should make it happen with this loom. We should start with this loom. And I was like, I just got this grant and it's exactly the same amount of what this loom costs, so I should do it. And I had just moved into a shared studio space, and I was like, I have space, I have grant money for it. And then after that, I think once you like get your first one, you want another one. So a month later, my studio mate was moving out of the city and was not going to take their loom, and I was like, I'm gonna crowdfund to just take their loom, and continue to work on providing, like, keeping myself accountable by acquiring the second loom to actually work toward creating a space where people could come in and rent that equipment. Mm-hmm. So we crowdfunded it. I crowdfunded it in 2 days. And that was incredible because I was like, I don't know, like there's a lot going on. It feels weird to be asking for help on this thing for myself, but it was just clear that people want to see it happen. A lot of other textile artists, friends were so on board with it that we crowdfunded it in basically 2 days, which was wonderful. I got it, and then awesome. I realized that I needed to move studios to really focus on making it a fiber studio, because I was sharing with ceramic artists, and ceramic dust and fiber and they just don't really mix. I'm in this beautiful space that makes me really, really happy. And it's also a building where there's a front desk and there's artists, like there's actual interest in creating community with the other artists in the building. So I was like, this is a great place to bring guests in, because that way, like, someone can check it themselves in at the front desk, and there's staff that can take them up on the elevator or direct them around the building, and they also do our like exhibition programming upstairs. So it just felt like the right place to just start the next phase of Loom Room. But it is complicated because I am learning how to run a venture as I'm going, and I'm also trying to figure out how to fund it, because it's like I have my own studio practice to fund, which I'm a full-time working artist, and I don't make that much money from my practice.
At the moment.
Not consistently.
Right.
And then I also have this whole other business, so this whole other child to handle. And I would love for there to be working with people, because again, part of the whole community thing is that we come up together, we manage things together, we share the responsibilities. So I have a open studio for Chicago Textile Week tomorrow, and that's really just in the effort of getting the word out there that these 2 looms are available for people to rent and to get in here. And I want to be able to host textile related events, or like just hangouts with people. And so it's stressful though to think about, like, out of my own studio, providing all of these things, being a resource to other people while I'm figuring out how to even be stable myself. So it's kind of like really daunting. I get stressed about it a lot. But like there's been a lot of encouragement and feedback and like interest in it. So it's definitely important to keep going, because people want this as a resource. Everyone wishes someone else did it, and I as well wish someone else was doing this instead of me. But
well, if you want anything done, you have to do it yourself, right?
That's really been, as an early career artist, I feel like that's really generally the thing that you end up concluding, is that whatever you want, you're gonna have to get it yourself. And if it's not there, if it's not happening right away, you're just gonna have to like facilitate it yourself. But it's a lot of work. It's not only managing yourself, it's managing other things. So I mean, that's a strong statement. I feel like that's a good one. Where can people follow you as we wrap things up? Where can people follow you, follow Loom Room, support, anything like that? So you can find me at my website, hopewang.com. And you can find me on Instagram at hopeless_hope. And then all of my links are basically in my Instagram bio. Loom Room you can follow on Instagram at LMRM_Chicago. And then Loom Room's also currently housed on my website, so it's just an extra tab there.
Okay.
But all my information, I tend to try to keep it updated on my website, is there, so you can find all of that once. If you go to any one of those single ones, you'll go down the rabbit hole and find everything else.
Nice. Well, thank you for taking the time, and then also thank you for all the help you're doing with Weisendale and the team. Truly appreciate it. We'll be in touch again probably in some months and see where you're at. Yeah,
I mean, I'd love to. It's been so interesting to see how the chapter changes every season.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been in here like once a season.
Yeah.
Since I moved in, and it's drastically different every time.
Yeah, it is.
So,
it is. That's great.
It's been a year of rapid growth and abundance, and I'm trying to keep up with it. Yeah. I don't know if I am.
You are.
But thank you for coming in today and talking to me about it.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah.